Hello, hello, good morning. Thank you for joining us on this Monday. I am so excited to welcome you all. My name's Allison Yee. I'm the founder and CEO of Up Next and the Retail Playground and Project Pop-Up. And if you're not familiar with us, we help facilitate pop-up experiences for brands to test out brick and mortar and connect with each other and build something very cool in the retail space in non-traditional ways. I am so thrilled to be welcoming Lindsay Binette to the retail playground today of the Wavy Brain. Lindsay and I actually almost crossed paths in life many times. We both worked for WS Development for years, but not at the same time. We were both in Hey Mama. We were both in all of these different spheres and didn't have the pleasure of meeting until sometime late last year. And actually, Lindsay was here at our Up Next HQ in Newton, and Kristen and I were there. And you have amazing energy, Lindsay. We were so excited to hear about all that you're doing. And then since then, I've been following along and attending your programs, and we couldn't be happier to have you here as our resident coach and expert on ADHD and neurodivergence. And having seen your presentations before and knowing that you are also a branding expert, they are just so inviting and visually appealing. And I think speak to the work that you do and understanding that people's brains work in different ways. And so you're communicating across all of these different elements. So we are recording today for anyone that wants to rewatch this or can't make it live. And I am so thrilled to turn it over to you, Lindsay, to go deeper in. Oh, just one quick note. If anyone has questions throughout, please drop them in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. Kristen, our head of community, will be moderating, and Lindsay is going to chime in and answer them as soon as she can, either throughout or later on in the presentation.
Yeah, I would love for this to be conversational. And if you all, or if any of you feel comfortable sharing, please do. That's part of this. Being an entrepreneur can sometimes be a really lonely place. And especially an entrepreneur with ADHD. So, we can swirl around in our own heads. So sharing oftentimes helps people feel seen and understood and not alone. So if you feel comfortable, please do. So thank you so much, Allison and Kristen, and the Up Next community and the retail playground community. What you guys are creating is pretty special and really helpful to entrepreneurs of all kinds out there, not even just retail entrepreneurs. But what we're going to do today is talk about ADHD and entrepreneurship. Before I go any further, if you feel comfortable sharing, who here has ADHD or has been diagnosed with ADHD or even thinks that they might have ADHD? All right, is that everyone? I can't see quite everyone. Yes, we've got.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. I was going to say, if you don't, then you likely, Kate, you suspect, but you're not sure. And it's so interesting. A lot of times my clients will come to me and they'll ask, do I have to have ADHD to work with you? And what if I don't have a diagnosis, but I feel really relatable to all those, things that you see out there in culture? And usually what I say to them is, here's the deal. Most non-neurodivergent individuals don't go around wondering if they have ADHD. So there's a high likeliness that if you do feel relatable to all the information out there and the challenges that come with ADHD, you may have it. But hopefully either way, this will be enlightening today. So I guess I should start by saying I'm Lindsay Binette. The Wavy Brain is my neuroinclusion consulting practice and ADHD coaching practice. And so I'm really happy to be here. My goal for today is to help us, help us neurodivergent entrepreneurs understand our brains a bit better, dismantle hustle culture, build sustainable systems, undiagnosed, but I'm pretty sure that's amazing. Okay, I'm going to close the chat because I'm going to get distracted by it. Okay. We'll talk about strength-based systems, things that like honor your natural rhythms, because as an ADHDer, you have a wavy brain, pun intended. And working at some of those really big companies taught me branding works. So let's get into it. I do want to just be clear that today is not about fixing yourself or fixing the way you work. It's really about learning about the way that you work, which might be different from other people. Oops, here we go. So our time together, here's what we're going to be doing. Don't add up those actual minutes because they don't actually add up to the right amount of time. I just put them there as benchmarks. What you're going to see today is a lot, but it's not exhaustive. This presentation could actually be like probably 12 presentations. My goal with today is to give you a high level overview, give you some insights, give you that permission slip that you've been looking for to do things differently in a way that works with your brain, not against it, and to spark your interest in looking for, in building your self-awareness further and, building your systems a little bit further. So, you know, uh, just just know that there's a lot in here. The presentation slides, I believe, have already been shared. So if I'm not, so I share that one so that you aren't furiously taking notes and getting distracted by that and not actually listening, but also so that you can use the notes as reference for future. So just very quickly about myself. So this is really my why, and my journey is really my why. I mean, really, my kids are my why, and my family's my why. But before creating the Wavy Brain, I spent about 20 years in the world of corporate brand management. I worked for some really incredible companies along the way, including with a former colleague of mine who's on this call, Missy, which is really exciting to see. Somewhere along the way, I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Unfortunately, I ignored that diagnosis. I swept it under the rug. I took the medicine and I just kept going with life. And that all came back to haunt me in a really big way during the pandemic. I was in the middle of my second pregnancy with Frankie, my daughter. She was born in August of 2020. And I basically had a realization that a lot of the challenges I was experiencing at the time were a result of my unmanaged ADHD. Because I sort of fell into this stereotype of like, oh, well, I'm not a little boy that can't sit still in a classroom. I don't really need to know that much about ADHD. I just sort of like, whatever it might be. I don't need to know all the strategies and tools. I take the medicine. But that is not true. You really, there's this really corny but true saying when I went through my coach training at ADCA that the pills don't build the skills. So if you choose to take medicine for ADHD, which I do, personal choice, you still need to build the skills and the awareness around how your brain works so that if you forget your medicine one day or your medicine wears off at the end of the day, you can still lean into those strategies and not feel like, oh God, I'm in a kayak without my paddle, right? You still have those tools. The real why in all this, as I mentioned, is my kids rather, but the realization that ADHD specifically is incredibly generational. So you have a 57% chance of being diagnosed with ADHD if one of your parents has it, and then a 32% chance if one of your siblings has it. So I ultimately was like, if I don't get my own shit together, I'm not going to be able to help my kids get their shit together and learn about their brains and support them through this process. And so that's why I started the Wavy Brain. All right, so let's get into it. The myth of the linear entrepreneur. Actually, sorry, I wanted to do something first. So this section is a lot about traditional. If you have ADHD, you know that your brain works a little bit differently. And chances are, and if this doesn't resonate, feel free to shout out a thought. But chances are you've heard lots of traditional productivity advice and things that and how-tos and how to get work done, etc. Chances are that you might have heard some of that advice and thought, well, wait, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for my brain. Does that mean something's wrong with me? Why can't I just sit down and like bang out the work that I need to do when I, scheduled it in my calendar to do it? I'm curious, as an entrepreneur, probably trying to find, good productivity and time management skills. Has there ever been business advice that has made you feel broken or behind or like just hasn't resonated with you and made you feel like, I don't know, this doesn't sound like it works for me? I don't know, maybe just raise your hand or shout it out. Nothing? Oh, I see in the chat. Oh no, those are just the decks. Also, love that hat. Undiagnosed, but I'm pretty sure. Maybe I should bake.
Lindsay, I feel like what you were just saying about why can't I sit down and do the work in the
Yeah.
time that I blocked out, which is, common advice. Like you need to time block your calendar, you need to do it in a
Yes.
way that means you can fit everything into your day. You're responsible for all these moving pieces. And so when you go to create that for yourself and it doesn't go as planned, it can be really frustrating. So I'm wondering if that's an example.
Yeah, that's a great example. Time blocking is a big one that you hear. And I have fallen into that trap as well. And then there's like this guilt and shame of like, wait, why can't I just do this? Like, why can't I force my brain to do this? Right? Yeah.
For Caitlin said, oh, sorry. Caitlin said in the chat, everyone tells me to just prioritize, but sometimes I feel paralyzed as to what needs to
Yes.
be prioritized.
Just
I feel
prioritize.
that.
Just
Mhm.
do it. Like, when is it due? And then work back from there. Yes, that logically makes sense, right? But when you sit down to do it, there might be a level of overwhelm or not sure where to start or even feeling paralyzed, right? Did someone else want to chime in there?
Like for me, like I've known you since school, so like that I have spina bifida, and for me, like this, I don't necessarily know that I would have ADHD, but the fact that, you know, from a disability standpoint, things
Yeah.
like that, to be able to advocate, to be able to, I have a lot of ideas in terms of um ways to help, people with spina bifida and disabilities and things like that.
Mhm.
And I work with spina bifida Western New York right now. But just getting ideas and
Yeah.
from my own medical things the last, several years, it feels like, I guess I feel behind in terms of how that goes,
Yeah.
because there's so much that I personally want to do, but
Yeah.
it does take time to get there and stuff like that. So
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Nick, because we're here talking about ADHD because a lot of entrepreneurs have ADHD. We typically need to find our own way to do things, and that causes us to make companies because we've got great ideas and we can be our own bosses. The good news is though, this what's in this deck is can really be applied to anyone. And when I do workshops, I really speak to it from a lens of learning about your brain so you can advocate in any situation, whether or not you have ADHD or any other type of neurodivergence or a disability, or whether it's a physical disability, emotional disability, whatever it might be. It's about advocating for yourself and not being afraid to get what you need to be the best you, right? So my hope is that you'll do that coming out of this. So thanks for sharing, Nick. So
sure.
I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I'm sure we've all seen this before, right? It's like, don't sleep, push right through, triple your results. Beyonce has the same 24 hours, right? Like this is like that hustle culture of like, go, 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 do, do, do. but that doesn't necessarily work with not only ADHD rhythms, but also like human rhythms. And, you know, so the hustle culture luckily has been starting to be dismantled over the last couple years, but you still see a lot of it out there. And just a small plug, this is a great Instagram account, the ADHD couple. If you're looking for like ADHD couple support, they're awesome. But yeah, so you know, I kind of look at hustle culture as like, what if it's just burnout with good branding, right? Like, you know, this is not necessarily, you know, the way to success unless you want to burn out, right? So the rest of this presentation is how do we get away from this kind of like hustle culture and doing things in very traditional and linear ways?
Hey, Lindsay.
Yeah.
One thing that just made me kind of realize, hi everyone, this is Missy. I used to work with Lindsay a million years ago, another life ago. But I was at the same place for 17 years and
Wow.
I didn't know I had ADHD, because I got so used to the rules of that system and that structure.
Yes.
And the wild part about the hustle culture, burnout culture was I was actively, now I'm realizing, acting like an entrepreneur within my system. And the things
Yeah.
I got the most praise for were the things that I did that were outside of my day job. But because I could complete all those tasks, because I understood that system, um, the hustle culture became really attractive because I'm like, well, I can do this. But
Yeah.
truly it was because my brain was wavy. I didn't know. And
Yeah.
now that I'm outside of that system without that structure, it's making it so much hard. Now I'm having normative ADHD symptoms that I just didn't know
Yeah.
were there because I was hiding in a system. So I don't know if that resonates with anyone that grew up in either education or like other corporate systems, but like building your own system is so hard.
Yeah. You know, Missy, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's really hard to build your own system. And 17 years, that is such a long time. You sort of get like those things and ways of working, whether they're harmful or not, get ingrained in your belief system even, right? Like it takes time. You know, Allison, you and I, you know, almost overlapped at WS, but I spoke with a previous colleague at WS Development recently, and she mentioned that it's taken her like 6 months to untangle some of those like ways of working and beliefs and things and the sort of permission to give herself to build her own system. So yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Missy, because it does take time and it takes awareness and it takes self-compassion to be able to like allow yourself to have that. Yeah. So, you know, some red flags of traditional productivity advice for neurodivergent thinkers. You know, we've talked a little bit about this already, but you know, we've been told that being consistent is the gold standard, right? As a coach, so many of my clients come to me and they're like, you know, the first question I ask is, you know, what do you want to get out of coaching? And one of the first things they say, or many people say, is, I want to be consistent. And, you know, that's wonderful. But sometimes for ADHD brains, consistently is inconsistently accessible, right? It's hard for us to find that consistency. And because we can't find it in a way that works for us, we start to see stuff like this: negative thought spirals. Why can't I do this? Shame and guilt, masking. Missy, what you did for 17 years, a big part of that was masking, hiding your, you know, in your case, you didn't know that you had ADHD, but because you didn't know, you were masking and trying to work in a way that everybody else did in that environment and system, corporate system around you. Burnout. That's ultimately what happened to me. You know, I literally was just, I was coming home crying every single day. Like, why can't I do this? Why don't I have like, you know, I know I'm driven. I know I'm ambitious. Why do I feel so broken in this way of working? And then consistently feeling like you have this empty tank, which for those of you that are parents, that is debilitating, right? Because you not only are running a business, but then you have to manage caregiving on top of that. And also working with a partner who may or may not be neurodivergent. That is a lot on your brain. And if you're, I'm going to talk a lot about a bit more about this later, but if you are consistently depleting your cognitive load and never re-energizing it, you're not going to be able to like recharge yourself enough in a way that is that is beneficial to you, right? It will eventually lead to burnout. So, I think it's important to recognize that this sort of like way of working is a system. Failure is kind of a harsh word. I actually meant to change that. I would say it's like a system glitch, not a personal glitch or a personal failure. This is, there's a really interesting book called Do Less by, oh my goodness, Celeste Headley. And she talks a lot about the history of how we in America came to work in this like 9 to 5 restrictive sort of environment. And it's a really interesting book. I'll at the end pop a link in the chat. But I think it's important to recognize that like this is not a failure of your own. This is sort of like something that we've sort of been born into, if you will. So some green flags, I guess, of a wavy-brained approach, like when you can give yourself permission to do things a little bit differently. And of course, later on in the presentation, we'll talk about like how to actually do that. Non-linear thinking, right? Like I always say to entrepreneurs, you have the ability to get to the same place as non-neurodivergent individuals. You just need your own way to get there. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, right? Like even if you are working in a corporate setting, you just need your own way to get to the end result, same end result as somebody else. You might just need your own path to get there. We have fast, creative thinking brains, which can also be overwhelming, but we'll talk about that in a minute. We're very emotionally rich. You feel deeply. We as ADHDers, and I apologize if some of you don't have ADHD, and I keep saying we, but for all intents and purposes, hopefully that's okay for today. We feel and experience life really, really deeply, but that can also be really intense emotionally. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. We're very energetically aware. This might be the piece that takes the longest to develop, but you may notice now that you're developing your awareness that like you walk into a room full of people and you can sense the energy. You can sense if it's good or bad or off, or you go into a meeting and you can sense that a disagreement just happened, or you can sense that there's tension or whatever. That is an incredible tool, but it can also be an overwhelming one, right? It can be, that energy can rub off on you if you're not careful or aware of how to harness it. We're typically very collaborative. We can thrive in shared momentum versus this this grind of being alone and by ourselves. And sometimes that also means like being collaborative on your terms, right? Not all the time, right? We, again, going to that cognitive load of how much brain space we have on our mental notepad. And we're typically very strengths centered. You have a tendency, this sort of like wavy brained approach is leading with your strengths instead of fighting with your wiring. I'm curious, like, does any of this resonate with any of you, or is there anything that's surprising or any of them you want to talk a little bit more about? All good if not. Just want to make sure I'm not talking too fast or too much. You can always come back.
I think we're all soaking it all up. Keep going, Lindsay.
Yeah. So what if we stopped fighting this wave, right? Like this desire to like want to take a break or want to, work out in the middle of the day. Like many of us on this call are entrepreneurs. So we have the chance to be able to do that in a way that works for us. And yes, there are real logistical, time constraints and schedules and kid pickup and things like that we have to pay attention to. But we can work around that if you give yourself permission to do that. So instead of forcing ourselves to push through fog when we're crashing, what happens if we could make space for reflection and recovery if we know that something else is coming, right? So Like, for example, what if, this is an example of like what a day might look like, right? This is a big, an example of what my day usually looks like, right? I'm a morning person. I get on the computer and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. I know exactly what, that's when I have like those creative juices flowing, right? Then I'm like, oh shit, I actually probably don't need coffee. I probably need to sit down and, relax or go for a walk. Then I can sort of like let that idea that I just had like integrate and reflect on what it might mean and how I might want to activate it. Then I get into hyper focus around what that looks like. And then I get foggy because I just hyper focused and I got rid of all of my like good ideas and all of that like momentum. So I need to recharge. And sometimes that looks like me working out. Sometimes that looks like me going to play with my cats. Sometimes that looks like me taking a couple deep breaths. And then I usually have another idea surge, right? So, your wave can look like anything. And it could go down more than it goes up. It's not about getting rid of those low points or feeling bad about those low points or needing a break. It's about riding those waves with more trust in yourself, more clarity, and fewer shame spirals. So that you know how to and re-engage with your day at the right points instead of fighting against certain constraints. Any thoughts, comments? Is it surprising? Yeah.
This is just so reinforcing. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd love to just now talk about the ADHD brain to we've talked about this idea of like, let's shift our mindset from traditional way of working and thinking. And I do want to just take a quick moment here to say like, this is not me hating on traditional systems, right? Sometimes those traditional systems work for those of us with wavy brains. It's more about giving ourselves permission to break away from the norm if we need to or want to, right? I just want to make sure that, this is not me saying, go in the office and say, F this, I'm not working a 9 to 5 anymore, right? It's about, still, approaching your day with clarity and calm and, professionalism, right? But I would love to also touch upon how the ADHD brain really works and understanding your operating system. So being mindful of time, I am not going to be able to talk about each one of these things that's going to come up on the screen, but I wanted to share 10 key principles for understanding how your brain works. There's a billion books out there. There's a million Instagram handles and TikTok feeds and all of those things to give you information. These like 10 principles will hopefully give you a different way or like an additional way to understand how your brain works. And again, remember, you're getting these slides. You have these slides, so you can always reference these things again. I'm going to talk about the purple ones in a little bit more detail. It's important to remember that every ADHD brain is unique. So I have a trifecta of inattentive and hyperactive ADHD, and I'm a Sagittarius. And that's not even a trifecta, that's 4. That's a quadrifecta. I'm the firstborn child. So I am like a hot mess of fiery attitude, right? But I always joke that I'm pretty sure when my kids were created, my son Ace got inattentive. He got the inattentive side of my brain, and my daughter Frankie got the hyperactive side of my brain. And that's important to note because if you have kids that have ADHD, you have to look at each individual as individuals because it's, each individual is very different. Our brains, number 3 here, are wired for interest, not importance. I'm going to say that again. Our brains are wired for interest, not importance. That is where the biggest like traditional productivity or work advice or time management advice really bucks the way that our brains work. We obviously can't go around our lives only doing the things that we like. We have to do things that we don't like, but that just means we have to find our way to get there. So that's tapping into your reward system. That's tapping into your motivation. That might be doing the interesting thing first to give yourself motivation to do the hard thing, right? So we'll talk about this a little bit more. Number 4 here, we're going to talk about this. Each person has different strengths, challenges, and processing modalities. That's going to be really important to sit and reflect on how your brain works and what, how do you process information, right? Like I always share this example of like, sometimes I'm a very visual person. I need a visual reminder of everything. I have Post-its everywhere, and there is nothing more satisfying than snatching a Post-it off my computer or off my kitchen cabinet and like once I've done it, throwing it out. But my husband loves he's a verbal processor, and he'll be like, hey, Linz, can you remind me to do XYZ later? And for a while, I was like, yeah, I want to be a helpful wife. Sure, yeah, I'll remind you. But then I inevitably forget to remind him how to do the thing because I'm not going to remember that unless it's literally in front of me. So I've had to communicate with him, hey, if you need me to remind you to do something, put it on the cabinet, on a Post-it. That way we're like working with each other's strengths here. We're not like you're setting me up for success to set you up for success, right? This is a really interesting, however, also frustrating part of can you guys see my mouse when I'm waving it? You can, okay. So number 5 here, situational variability. It's a bitch, I'm not gonna lie. It means your ADHD will change according to different situations. So it's a bitch. However, now that you know about it, you'll be able to give yourself permission to be okay with that and figure out what to do next. So an example here is there are days where I need music to like keep me on track, keep like time ticking for like to help me mark time. But then there are other days where that same exact playlist is like nothing but distracting and I have to like turn it off right away. That is because your ADHD is situationally variable. So now that you know that, you'll be able to see when those things happen and find a different tool or strategy to tap into. Sorry. Sorry. So as these are coming back up, number 6, sometimes we feel as ADHDers triggered by restrictive or confining systems. That's why flexibility is really important for us. Again, we have to somehow confine or conform to some of those rigid systems. We can't like just completely go out on our own in some ways. Like, for example, if your boss puts a meeting on your calendar and that or like a client or a pitch or something is on your calendar that you can't manage or you don't have control over, that's okay. It might feel triggered and restrictive, but we can find ways to work around that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Lastly, I've mentioned this word cognitive load a couple of times. This is essentially all human beings have a mental notepad. ADHD or not, and I'm using my hands here as like an illustration. Every time you use like a piece of executive function or something to plan, or you work on something, you do a project, you're chipping away at your executive function and your cognitive load a bit. That's very much simplifying how it works. But once you get down to a certain point of cognitive load and mental notepad or mental space, if you don't find a way to recharge that, you're just going to hit bottom. And that burnout moment or that rage mom moment that I have with my kids will like come in. So it's important to know what your cognitive load looks like. And we'll talk about that more. Despite all of these things, ADHD can be an incredible strength. It just has to be harnessed in the right context and the right environment. I'm going to pause just for a second while also keeping an eye on time here. Is any of this surprising to you? Is it new? You want to talk about any of them?
I will chime in. Hi, I'm Ashley, by the way. I am a well-seasoned ADHDer and mom of a young ADHDer. And I think these are great points. I think that the emotional irregulation is also something that a lot of people, I don't know, kind of label, right? As just like the bad type of
Yeah.
thing. And it's really, if you're not fueling yourself and going through like your systems and doing all of those things, inevitable, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfortunate that that happens that way, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, being a parent with ADHD and parenting potential neurodivergent individuals is, I could spend like 19 hours talking about that.
Yeah.
It is really, really challenging. And like, please give yourself the compassion to be like, this sucks sometimes, because it does. And it's really challenging. The good news is you can work with you and your kids or kid to like work together. And I try to work with my kids. Like I just say to them, like I reference this mom rage moment. Like I get down with them after the mom rage is gone. And I just say, listen, I'm trying really hard here, guys. And I'm sorry that I can't do it perfectly all the time. Right. And like you're leading by example in those situations, and you're giving them more language to be able to be more emotionally intelligent as they develop as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, thanks for sharing. All right, I'm going to keep it moving. Oops, one of my little transitions didn't work there. Okay, so I've talked a lot about this already, but here are some common traits. We're built for speed, not routine. We are built for creativity, not necessarily repetition, iteration, and not finality. Like, let's be okay with iterating. Let's be okay with feeling those feelings, because a lot of times that feeling is really great intuition. Here are some of our strengths. We've talked a lot about these already. You know, my favorite part about me and my strengths is that I am a creative problem solver. Like if you give me a challenge, I will find a way to figure it the F out. It's important to know though, that while some of our strengths are incredible strengths, not everybody understands the ADHD brain, right? So while I have great ADHD energy, if you will. I have a lot of energy. I have this like contagious energy. That can also be a lot for some people, right? So knowing when to turn it up or turn it down or communicate for the broadest common denominator, right? Like I can give you all my ADHD energy today because that's what we're talking about. But in a larger setting, you know, that might not be the time or place. So it's important to know when some of these can be tricky, like hyper focus. You don't want to hyper focus to the point where you don't get up and go to the bathroom, because that's going to make you uncomfortable and that's going to be a distraction, right? So it's important to know about, you know, when those things can be a challenge. Task initiation, speaking of challenges, can be hard for us. Executive function overload, decision fatigue, sleep challenges, all of these are probably very familiar. Negative self-talk is one that we don't realize that we do a lot or can do a lot, right? We talk to ourselves, and I'm of course on the spot forgetting the statistic, but later on in the appendix, I have a resource section with an incredible book that is not about ADHD at all. However, it's a book that really like helped me start this journey of self-awareness. It's called Chatter: The Voice Inside Your Mind and Inside Your Head, Why It Matters and How to Harness It, by Ethan Kross. He talks about how many hours a day we spend talking to ourselves. And as ADHDers, we're prone to thinking and talking to ourselves a lot more negatively. And that kind of focus on ourselves negatively can grow. That can be our narrative. It can be our, you know, our story. And we don't want that to be the case, right? Perfectionism can really be a challenge as well. Any of this surprising? I experience all, and you know, you might not experience, again, to my point earlier about how all ADHD traits are different and ADHDers are different. You might not experience all of these. You might experience some and not others. You might experience them on a spectrum of variability, right? And just to take a quick moment of validation and recognition to say, like, the roller coaster is real. Sometimes you feel awesome and you get this great idea, and then you overcommit. And then you feel bad about overcommitting. And then you don't talk about your overcommitting. So you might work until the last minute or burn the midnight oil. And then you totally get burned out. And then you might do it all over again. This is not about your willpower. This is about your wiring. You're not lazy. You're working with a brain that works differently. And bonus, if you are a woman and you have hormones, you have the added, well, you do have hormones if you are a woman. That was a weird way to phrase that. You have the added bonus of hormones greatly impacting your ADHD traits and your energy levels and possibly your medicinal efficacy. If you take medicine, some ADHDers, some female ADHDers have reported feeling like their medicine is not effective during certain times of their cycle. So in the appendix, I have a hormone chart and a foundational needs checklist that you should definitely check out because, and I'll get into this a little bit later, tracking your cycle, whether or not you get a standard period, is really, really important because it'll help you start to notice some themes. How many of you find this roller coaster relatable? A lot of you, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's figure out how to work with the roller coaster instead of, and let's not look at the roller coaster as necessarily a bad thing. And maybe it's that wave that we want to be able to ride. So the rest of this is about working in flow versus out of flow with our brain, finding those rhythms. And a big part of that is building your awareness and doing some reflective deep dives on how your brain actually works. So again, productivity is about output. And, ADHD is often seen as a productivity problem or challenge instead of like an energy challenge. I talk a lot about I talk about this with my clients a lot, in that ADHD is, it's a lot of things, but at a very, very high level, it's actually more about managing your energy than your time or your productivity. It's finding that alignment between your brain and your body and your energy and emotions. You don't have to find, so the way I sort of broke this up is like, what does flow look like? And what does out of flow look like, right? And the goal isn't to be in flow at all times, right? That's not possible, right? We have down days. We have days where we get our period if we're women and we just need to have an invisible day off, and that is okay. The goal here is to know when you're out of flow that you can respond with care and compassion, and you can take a pause moment and reflect on what you need to do next instead of panic and like, oh shit, what do I do? How do I give myself permission to move forward, etc. Another book that I highly, highly recommend is this book called Designing Your Life. And again, you have the deck and all the links should be clickable. If some of these links don't work, let me know. It's called Designing Your Life, How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life. And the authors talk about looking at flow through a designer's lens, through like a design perspective. They're two people that used to lead design at like big companies like Apple. And they talk a lot about flow and what it means and what it looks like. And they give a lot of additional exercises that you could tap into if you'd like. So we're now going to do a worksheet, a quick little exercise. We don't have a ton of time to do this. But what I wanted to do was introduce this idea of a personal energy map. And the data that we're going to put down on this personal energy map can be sliced in a lot of different ways. The goal is to think about this as a general high level, like generally thinking about the flow of your day and the flow of your time and the flow of your energy, so that, so to like establish a foundation and awareness around how your brain likes to think and flow, so that later on you can maybe add a different lens of, do different energy maps, whether it's like one for the weekend, one that includes your kids, or one that doesn't include your kids, or one that includes like a really busy work week, or one that includes a creative week, or whatever it might be. But the goal is to like think about this through the lens of, you know, what does my energy look like? And there is no right or wrong way to this. So I believe in the chat, Kristen put in, you know, this worksheet is in the presentation, but it is also in a separate attachment with just the worksheet if you'd like. If you don't want to do this digitally, just sketch this out really quick on a sheet of paper. Like, let's not overthink it. Let's go analog, write down on a sheet of paper. The y-axis is your energy level. The x-axis is your time of day. Just sketch out when things look good for you, right? So, you know, mark times that you might feel focused, mark times that you might feel drained or in flow. I'm going to switch to the next slide if you guys are all okay with that. That gives some more thought starters as to think about that. Think about this. Yeah, I'm on the right slide. So, you know, I'm gonna pause here and give a few minutes to let you all just like start to think about this and reflect a little bit. And I'll keep these on the slide on the screen here. But it is important to remember that all of this is a two-way street, right? Like, there are things in our day that we might not be able to change, right? So like this third bullet here, what external factors affect some of your patterns, whether that's meetings or meals or moods or hormones. But it's important to remember that all of this is a two-way street. You as the ADHDer aren't the one that needs to make all the changes. It's okay for you to advocate for a meeting to adjust. If you can't adjust a meeting, how might you manage your energy and your time and your brain space around that meeting to compensate? So I'm going to give you all a couple minutes just to like think and reflect on this, or chime in with questions and ask. And I'm going to pull up the chat while you guys are doing this to see if there's any questions along the way. Oh my gosh. All I see is the admin of Up Next. So whoever was the teacher, I don't see the name there. This makes a ton of sense that you were like, all of my energy during the day, kids, oh my gosh. And then coming home and just not being able to move and being completely worn out and burned out. Think about that from this lens of, oh my gosh, so much. So like, our brains are wired for interest, but they are also, it's not that we can't pay attention, it's that we need to choose what to pay attention to. So if you think about the school environment, you have to pay attention to all the kids bouncing off the walls, your lesson plan, all the noise, all the visual distractions, all the sensory overload that comes with that. That is highly depleting to that cognitive load of yours. So it's no wonder that you came home and just like couldn't do anything else. That's where, like, if we were working together, I would say, all right, let's figure out how to like find a tiny chunk in the day to re-energize, knowing that you have a very strict schedule. As a teacher, you don't have a lot of your own time. How do we figure out what's a way that you can like re-energize throughout the day so that you don't come home so burned out?
That was me. My name's Natalie.
Oh, hi, Natalie. Thank you for sharing.
Hi. Yeah, it was crazy. Like it was like, okay, at 8 o'clock, we have to start this. At 9 o'clock, we have to like be ready to have history. So like it was a very, very structured thing.
Yes.
And then I quit teaching and started working from home for Up Next. And it was like, oh, there's not as much structure. Like, I'm a mom now. Like, this is insane. And so it's taken me the better part of 3 years to really get a hold on some good coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you for sharing that. The structure is like helpful, and you'll see on the next slide, I talk about this. Flexible structure is where we really thrive. And again, our work environments might not always allow for that. So we have to figure out how to work around it. Like I have some people, like in past workshops, people are like, well, if I work at a restaurant, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I have to wait the tables, or I have to seat people or whatever. That's where we have to manage your energy and time around that, right? Or maybe it's a moment to say, is this the right direction for me or the right environment for me, right? So as you know, I'm going to keep moving because we have, I want to make sure to stay aware of time here. You know, does anyone want to share any insights that might have come out of this personal energy map, or is it helpful? Is there anything that's surprising that came out of it? You know, would you add to this? Would you subtract to it? You know, is this, you know, I'm curious what any, you know, initial thoughts are out of this. And it's okay if no one shares.
So I have something, it feels kind of negative, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I am definitely a morning person. There's times where like I can wake up and I feel like in an hour when I'm like downstairs by myself, I am like, I can't even believe how much I just cranked out. But I have two young children, so who are such sucky sleepers. And so I feel like I miss out on my like most productive times or like my me time even because I'm so tired from the middle of the night or like whatever it may be. Um, so it's like on one hand, I know when I have that energy level, but it's like somebody else is taking it from me.
Yeah. And that is so frustrating, Caitlin. Like just to share, like yes, I feel that really hard because I could get up at 4 a.m. in the middle of the night and be like, I got it all, right? In fact, a very real moment here, everybody, I was working on this presentation at 5:30 this morning because I needed the deadline to like help me finish the presentation. You know, Caitlin, it's never going to be a one size fits all. You're never going to be able to find that, especially, you know, knowing that your kids are younger and they're still getting through that sleep, you know, that sleep sort of figuring out how to sleep and stay in their beds. My daughter's in my bed every single night. That's where, again, if we were working together on coaching, I would say, all right, let's talk about how we can find one day where you get your you time. Like, is it you agree with your partner that they take, you know, the middle of the night shift, or can we try to shift something, right? This is where we have to find comfort in a little bit of the gray and not say, okay, in order for me to be productive, I have to get up at 4 a.m. every single day to be able to get stuff done. It is like, okay, let's define what would feel like an improvement here. And that might be like, okay, if I could get me time 2 days a week, and ideally it would be an hour, but you know what? I'll take 15 minutes. Fine, right? Like, how can we take small steps towards improving that? And knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel eventually, because your kids will grow out of that. And what you're doing for yourself now is learning about that now, so that when your kids are out of that, you can hit the ground running and you're better off as a result of that. But I hear you. It's really hard. I have to wake up like so early because I'm the same way. If I don't have my coffee before my kids get up, I'm like a rage monster immediately, because all you hear is mom, 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 mom. And that's like so irritating.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going here because I want to make sure we get through all this. A couple of strategies for working with our ways, if you will. Again, it's really important to call out that I'm not hating on the traditional like productivity advice here, because, you know, for some people, time chunking might work. For other people, mode-based chunking might work better, right? So, for example, I used to love doing expense reports on Fridays because by Friday, my brain is gone and I needed something that is just like literally data entry, and I would make time for that, right? But it's also okay, and, you know, to move on to the next bullet, that if you generally have you've generally decided, you know, Friday is great for expense reports, but say on Friday, you suddenly get like an idea surge and you're like, actually, F the expense report, I want to roll with this idea. Go for it. It's about allowing yourself to like, you know, be flexible where you need it, right? And as even in this last example that Caitlin, you just shared, consistency doesn't have to be every day. It can be weekly, it can be, you know, daily, it can be like defining what consistency would mean to you, right? And then lastly, like trying energy-based planning. So can you plan around when you feel good, not just when your calendar says so? And again, acknowledging that there are very real things in here, deadline-based tasks, real life-based tasks like kid pickup, or you're sharing a car with your partner and you have to go pick him up or drop him off at work or whatever it might be. Kate, I'm having a squirrel moment and I need to see the animal that's on your lap. Kate, when? Let's see the animal. Hi. Oh, who is that fluffy baby? Oh my God. Tell your cat I say hi. Sorry, I had to. I had to lean into the ADHD for a minute. So, you know, my point is try different things. Try to use, you know, flexible structure or energy-based planning if you can. Have any of you heard of these before? Or tried any of these before? Maybe, maybe not.
No.
Are there any of them that like seem interesting?
I think
I,
I have been like using the energy-based planning, and I feel guilty because it's not a very organized way.
Ooh, that guilt, right? That guilt and shame comes up.
Mm.
I would love to hear more of that guilt. Is it not, I don't want to hear that you have more of the guilt. Sorry. I would love to hear more about what the guilt, what's that bringing up for you? Why do you feel guilty?
Because I make plans ahead, but I sometimes I just distracted by other things and start to do that. And I did it very well, but when I was thinking of my original plan, I feel like, oh, I missed it. It's just about I didn't do what I planned.
Yeah, that's very real, right? That's where the flexible structure comes in. Where can you like shift that thing that you decided you were going to do on this day, but then you woke up and it wasn't going to work that day? Where can you move it, right? And Smita, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, number one, but I love that you said in the chat, I look at it as a way of self-care. Don't know if that's the best approach. It is a way of self-care, right? If you are working with your energy, you're able to will be able to get more done, right? Because you're working with your brain instead of against it.
Right. Thank you.
All right, so we're getting close on time, which always happens. So let's design some wavy systems here. And talk quickly about mindset. Let's mindset. Again, there is no right way. There's just the way that works for you. So let's shift out of this rigid mindset and try to move to a little bit more of a wavy one, right? So we've talked a lot about these already. I'm going to quickly go over a couple of them, but things like should, like why are we always shoulding ourselves to death? There's literally there's no rule book on how to like work, right? There's just sort of like habits that we've picked up along the way, right? So, you know, I should be more consistent. I should be able to push through even though I'm tired. I don't deserve the time to work out if I don't get this done. Like, what? What is that? I say it all the time, but I'm trying to get over it, right? So instead, can we switch to I thrive and switch to things like I thrive with anchor points instead of a set schedule. Structure helps me, but doesn't define me. If my brain gets bored of that system, let's try a new one. Because newsflash, your brain will get bored of that system if you have ADHD. It will get bored, and that is okay. My brain works differently, and that's why I'm good at this, right? So trying to switch to a little bit more of a flexible mindset. So one way that you can do that is learning about your processing modalities. We aren't going to be able to talk in like this slide could literally be an entire 2-hour long presentation. So we're not going to be able to go through all of these, which is why I shared them all with you in the presentation. But start to reflect on what your learning and processing modalities might be. And the beauty about knowing what some of these processing modalities are is that you might be able to tap into one that you never knew existed or never knew might be beneficial, right? Like where I was trained in my coach training course, the gentleman that founded it said that he was only able to get through his PhD program by reading his course books out loud while rocking in a chair. That was how he got through his courses. The way I got through my ADHD coach training was I would do stuff with my hands. Some of our courses were excruciatingly boring, and I used to have to work on a cross stitch or a crochet to be able to get through that because it helped me pay attention. Misty, I feel like you'll appreciate this. My boss, when I worked at Nike, when I was the admin to the marketing department, she used to say to me, Lindsay, you're the admin. How are you doodling? And why are you doodling? Well, you're supposed to be taking notes. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the doodling actually helped me pay attention because it was my way of like focusing on the right things instead of furiously writing down all the notes and being afraid that I was forgetting things. So explore some of these modalities and try some that you might not think work for you, right? Whether it's kinesthetic or tactile, or, another good example here is the last one. I learned as a brand manager, a lot of times I was asked to give feedback to our agencies if they would present something to us right away. And they'd be like, what do you think? And I'd be like, I don't know how to give feedback yet. And I would just try to give feedback right away. And it wasn't until later that I learned that actually wasn't helpful. If I leaned into the way that I process, which is very intuitively, and I said, you know what? I need like a day to let this marinate. Let me get back to you with feedback later. I would have given a lot more productive and like effective feedback in those moments. So start to learn about how you might process information, write it down, and start to explore what those might be. The next slide is all about tools. So, okay, what kind of tools can I tap into once I learn about my brain? What kind of tools can I tap into and like experiment with? There's a lot of stuff on this slide here. I'm sorry, I apologize in advance. But again, my goal is to give you this presentation so that you could, print this out and mark it up and circle things or cross things out. But these are basically some strategies for you to try. Body doubling, for example. Has anyone heard of body doubling? Maybe just give a quick hand. So body doubling is the idea of utilizing, it's not quite lining up here. It's supposed to line up to accountability without shame. But body doubling is the idea of utilizing another human being as a way to be accountable. So, for example, I work most days alone in my office. On Fridays, my husband works from home. So sometimes I will go downstairs and work out of the kitchen where he works because his simple presence keeps me focused. I don't say to him like, hey, I'm using you as a body double, because he would probably roll his eyes at me because that's just how he is. Instead, I just go and work where he is, and it helps me stay focused. So do that kind of, try that maybe someday. Call your friend and say, hey, you know what? I got to get work done and I'm having a really hard time focusing. Can we just be on Zoom together and like be on mute, turn off video, but I just know you're here and I'll tell you what I've gotten done after this. And it just, might allow you to tap into that accountability a little bit. I'm going to talk about this one really quickly. Interest stacking. I mentioned this earlier in the presentation. Sometimes we hear things like in traditional productivity advice, like eat the frog. Has anyone heard that before? It's like this weird phrase. I don't know where it came from, but the idea of it is do the hard thing first. That is really hard for us ADHDers. Instead, maybe try interest stacking. Do something, give yourself permission to do something fun and interesting. Don't let yourself go and do the fun and interesting thing for 6 hours, or else you'll not do the important thing. Maybe give yourself a timer and say, I'm going to go practice piano for a half an hour, and then I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to work on this presentation. What that does, it gives you momentum. it gives you momentum to lean into instead of you digging your heels in, not wanting to do the hard thing. Another one that is like really interesting for us ADHDers, change your environment. Go to another area to work. Flip your desk around if you can. Redecorate your desk. Sometimes that novelty gives us the spark that we need. Things might start feeling like they are going to fall apart because inevitably that's what happens in the human existence. Our kids get home and they're sick, daycare calls, and it's like, ultimately we need to like reschedule something, or maybe we start our period and we're like, nope, I can't do any of this. Or maybe we're just feeling overwhelmed at what might happen, or what might be happening at that moment. How can we reframe that as things probably aren't falling apart? Don't panic. This is actually your brain and body trying to communicate with you and trying to give you data. That is your brain and body going, hey, red flag, something needs to shift here. So instead of trying to hammer your way through that task, or hammer your way through that overwhelm, or hammer your way through work when you probably can't work while your kid is sick there at home, right? Instead, give yourself a second to pause, find a way to regulate. And this is like a quick 2-minute grounding, like a quick little reset grounding toolkit. These are more like survival kits or survival tools for your nervous system. So like, maybe press your feet into the floor and like name 5 things that you see out loud. Put cold water on your wrists, or sniff, that sounds funny. Breathe in essential oils from your diffuser. Do a quick mindful walk. That is one of my favorite things. Instead of like turning on music, I will go for a walk, a lap around my street, and I'll tap into all of the senses. I'll think about, what am I seeing? What do I smell? What do I hear? What does my pace feel like? Does it feel good? Am I sweating? What does the air feel like on my skin? Just give yourself 5 minutes to like feel those sensory things. Take 5 deep breaths of air. Take 5 deep breaths. Is anyone here an Andrew Huberman fan? He's a neuroscientist and he talks about taking a sip of air. So like this idea that you breathe in a sip of air through your nose, and then you take another sip at the top and hold it. So I'll demonstrate. You go, hold it for a second, breathe out your nose, and just fully let it go. That extra sip of air opens up your capillaries even further and regulates your nervous system. Another one, auditory. Say your name out loud. Kristen, stop. Kristen, pause. Hold on. Stop the spiral. Ashley, whoa, stop the spiral. Allison, it's okay for this to feel really hard right now. And it is. Saying your name out loud like that, and I'm sorry, I'm just saying the names of people I see on my screen here. Saying your name out loud will act as a positive cognitive disruptor. Your brain physically hears things differently out loud, almost as if you're telling yourself, but you're telling a friend to pause and give it a second, because that's probably what you would do to a friend. If a friend said to you, hey, I'm spiraling out of control, what would you say? You would probably say, like, give it a second. Let's pause. Let's reset, right? And then once you reset, you'll be able to re-engage. You'll be able to process what you just experienced. For those of you that like therapy, I love therapy. There's this concept in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to name it to tame it. If you are able to name the experience or talk through the experience that you just happened, you'll be able to identify how you got there, calmly move on, and learn from the experience so that the waves get a little bit smoother every time. So, pick a modality for processing that supports you. So like maybe you journal, maybe you write down what might have just happened, or maybe you like just do a quick voice memo and you verbally process like, holy shit, this is what I felt before it happened. This is what's happening right now. This is how I feel about it. I have so much more to do. Like, talk through the experience and then think about some of these prompts. What can I do next? What's one small thing I can do to move forward? What's one small thing I can offer myself as grace? It's 1 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock. What's one small thing? There's going to be no productivity tool that works for everybody, but my hope is that these are all a combination of things that help you get to that place. Okay. I know that we're at time here. I'm just going to spend, if it's okay, the last like 3 minutes to wrap up here. And I apologize for going so fast through
Keep
these last
going. And if
ones.
anyone has a hard stop, you will get the recording, not to worry.
Yes, perfect. So, we've talked about all of these things at this point. We've talked about traditional versus non-traditional, rigid versus wavy. How can we build and scale your business in a way that feels good for you, right? So, scaling your business through this operating system and your rules. The traditional way of looking at things might be like, okay, revenue goals, discipline, always on, growth at all costs, scaling fast. You might need to write down your revenue goals. That's probably a good thing if you want to make money, right? But that might not necessarily be the measure at how you're looking at things always, right? Maybe it's looking at the revenue goals through a lens of joyful systems, a combination of all the things that we just talked about, aligning your energy, intentionally giving yourself time off so that you have the energy to reach your revenue goals, right? Growth at your pace instead of somebody else's pace. We're talking about internal versus external, right? Like not looking at those, not judging ourselves, right? Because that will help you sustain long-term without burning out. And I'm curious, like, I know I've breezed very quickly through a lot of these slides at the end here, but I'm curious, like, does anyone have any insight that you might like to share on like what success might feel like now that you've got some more insight as to how your brain works? And if you do you want to share? I could even share one for myself if helpful. My wavy system is realizing that I must move every single day. And for me, I can't say it. It used to be, Lindsay, you must work out every single day. I was an athlete. I was an athlete in college. I played lacrosse in college. So like for me, that is what like I was like, I have to work out every day. It has to be an hour long and I need to sweat in order to feel it. But what I realized as I got older and as I realized that like time is a real thing, I realized that movement is also like, what are you really getting out of working out? Really, what you're getting is movement. That movement is a nervous system regulator. So I switched my mindset to be more one that is like, okay, instead of working out every day, I'd like to work out 2 to 3 days a week, but I need to move every other day. So what does movement look like to me? Sometimes it's standing up and just doing some stretching. Sometimes it's taking a walk around the block. Sometimes it's, literally going up and down my stairs a couple times. But that movement helps me be regulated. It helps me have less rage mom moments with my kids. And I've given myself permission to add that as part of my success profile, right? Like that is not necessarily a business goal per se, but it allows me to build my business in a way that works for me. Anyone else want to share some of those? Again, all good if not. Ooh, thanks for sharing, Ashley. You try to get to those noon classes many days of the week as possible. Yeah.
If I can.
Yep.
I think that something else like kind of like redefining success. And it's not like checking something off the box necessarily, right? Like it's not like, oh, okay, my email is, down to, I don't know, a couple hundreds or something, right? It's like the actual emotional feeling of like doing something good, right? The task itself might not be complete, but moving towards like the next process is the success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Like checking boxes. Yes. Like that feels really freaking good. And I bet every single one of you has put something on your list that wasn't there just so you could check it off because you could see that you did it, right? Actually, there's something valid in that. As ADHDers, we don't have a good working memory. So sometimes being able to see that we did get something done is really validating for us. But to your point, Ashley, sometimes it's not all about checking those boxes. Sometimes it's making progress on that thing instead of just checking it fully off, right? Yeah. Oh, I love that, Jill. Being artistic every day. Yes, absolutely. Creativity. Oh gosh, this is a whole nother presentation I could get into. It's all about your character strengths. I'm not going to go on that tangent because it's just going to throw us. But yes, thank you for sharing that because being creative is something I have to do every single day. And sometimes it's literally just doodling on a note paper instead of like pulling out my full watercoloring kit that I spent $1,000 on that I really shouldn't. Well, caught myself on that that I probably shouldn't have done because it's $1,000 and I probably didn't need all that. But sometimes it's just about doing something quickly and creative, right? All right. So we're coming up on the last slide here. What's next? This is permission. Consider this slide, this last slide, your permission and reason to practice. You're allowed to do things differently. You're allowed to work differently. Progress over perfection. You're allowed to rest and recharge and move without needing to earn it. You're allowed to try new systems every week, month, or even every day. I love every year when I see ADHDers go, well, it's January 1. I started a new calendar. Can't wait to throw this out in a couple of weeks when it doesn't work for me anymore. That is actually awesome. This is your permission to, if that calendar or planner doesn't work for you anymore, take it, put it aside, and try something else. Don't put it too far aside because you might find that you might want to go back to that another day. Instead of looking at that in your drawer with shame and guilt, like, oh, I couldn't stick to another system. Instead, realize that your brain got bored of that system and it wanted to try something else, right? You're allowed to do it your own way and still be taken seriously and to still be a successful business person and entrepreneur. Start where you are. That's the only thing that you can do, right? See what we have here. Who needed some of these permission slips today? Yeah, even I did. I'm not going to lie. They say as an ADHD coach, I have my own ADHD coach because I need these reminders all the time. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you for everybody for sharing. I hope it was insightful. I hope it gave you some new tools and systems to try, some ideas. I hope it gave you a little bit of understanding on your kids, right? If your kids have ADHD, or maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a partner, husband, spouse, significant other, somebody that you work with. Maybe it gave you some insight into how their brains might work. If you're interested in talking more, let's do it. I am giving everybody from the retail playground, slow down, 25% off, and anyone that joined today's presentation, 25% off coaching. If you're interested, we can always have a discovery call and just talk about it. I will never put the hard sell on you. There is nothing worse than that. And then just to quickly show you some of those appendix slides and resources that I talked about. If you're a woman, track your cycle. Even if you have an IUD, you'll be able to see themes. You'll be able to start to see data and potentially give yourself more compassion. Print this out and put it somewhere. Because if you are not this is one checklist I'm going to make you do every single day. Because if your foundational needs are not met, these things will make your ADHD flare. If you didn't sleep enough last night, Caitlin, if your kids were up at, all the hours of the night, you're not going to be 100% today. So either give yourself 30 minutes to rest, or just give yourself the compassion to know that like something has to fall off the calendar today, and that is okay, right? Cognitive load. I talked about this a lot throughout the presentation. This is just a visual because I like visuals. And then here are tons of resources. A lot of the stuff that I've referenced throughout the presentation. Anything by Brené Brown. She's wonderful. Yeah, lots of books, lots of articles. And yeah, that is it, I believe. Yeah.
Lindsay, thank you so much. This entire session felt like self-care to me. There was just
Good.
so much amazing information packed in, relatable stories. So I think everyone really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to continue
I'm so
pouring
glad.
over all of these materials.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't like so fast at the end. It's really hard to do these sometimes because each one of these presentations could be about 15 hours. And I know we're busy humans and we don't all have time for that. So I appreciate your patience and sharing and willingness to like keep learning more about yourself after this.
Amazing. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time and
Caitlin, you
energy, and
asked,
for
are all the
everyone.
resources in the PDF? Yes, they're all in there and they're all clickable. So, and it sounds like Allison is going to be sending everything out via email as well. So thank you, everybody.
Email from
And
us.
I really appreciate seeing some of those familiar faces. I really appreciate it.